Hello and welcome to a prim and proper, aristocratic, dowry-laden episode of Movies You Miss podcast.
Oh, yes. Time for some tea, crumpets, and the English countryside.
Yep, there's nothing like the patriarchy and tying a woman's worth to who she can marry.
Yeah.
These movies, though, are fantastic and based on books of equal quality, so I am excited to dive into this week's topic.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun episode, that's for sure.
And how are you doing today, John?
I'm doing pretty good, V. I'm ready to get all Jane Austen up in this podcast today.
Yes, both of these movies are based on the works of Jane Austen, but before we get into them, thank you everyone for joining us. If you are new to this podcast, we are two industry veterans who spent 25 years collectively working in different parts of filmmaking. We've also been friends for over 2 decades and love to recommend movies to you without spoiling them.
That's absolutely correct. No spoilers here. Great recommendations. Always a fun time here at Movies You Miss podcast.
And another thing we like to do here at Movies You Miss podcast is discuss the new movies we saw in theaters or on streaming this week.
Yeah!
And I believe you went to the theaters this week, John.
You're right. I went to the theaters twice, and I actually watched something on streaming as well. So I saw 3 new movies this weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't disappointed with any of them, which is kind of shocking, especially because the streaming one was on Netflix. I guess I'll start there.
Okay.
I watched the new Richard Linklater, Glenn Powell starring Hitman.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
It was good?
I watched it. Amy wanted to watch it, and I'm not going to say that it was, super good, but it was very entertaining. It kind of follows the formula of Bernie a little bit. The article that the movie is based on is written by Skip Hollandsworth, who wrote the article that Bernie is based on. So there's a lot of that parallel going on. Glenn Powell brought it. He was not Glenn Powell. Yeah, he completely turned into somebody that I did not expect. There was some moments of comedy. It is not a true comedy. I think a lot of people are going into it thinking that it's going to be some hilarious movie. It's not. It's actually a little bit darker, a little bit heavier. But overall, I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay, so it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either.
No, it's definitely not great, but it's watchable, it's enjoyable. It's something that I would recommend to people that are fans of Richard Linklater.
Okay.
Second film that I watched was the new Ashana Night Shyamalan film starring Dakota Fanning, The Watchers.
Yes, we saw a trailer for this together.
We did, yes, and I went to the theaters to see it. A lot of people are dumping on it, and it's kind of funny because the people that are dumping on it are actually thinking that M. Night Shyamalan wrote and directed it.
So they're just misinformed and judgy.
Exactly, and they did not read the trailer or the credits saying that written and directed by Ashana Night Shyamalan. Enjoyable movie. It went a completely different direction than I anticipated it going. Dakota Fanning was pretty good. It's not perfect. It's not spectacular, but for the hour and 45-minute length of the movie, I was guessing the entire time. So that's something that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had a conversation with a fellow cinematic fan, and they said that it was not something they expected. However, it should have ended before such and such, and I completely agreed with them. It kind of had a bit of a Lord of the Rings sort of ending situation going on.
There were 3 endings?
Yeah, it could have ended a lot earlier than it did. I felt like the last 15 minutes were very producer-influenced and not so much Ashana Shyamalan. Nepotism is alive and well in Hollywood, but this is still an enjoyable movie. It's not super scary, but it has a good amount of thriller aspects to it. I would give it about a 6.9 out of 10.
Okay, so a little higher than The Hitman then.
Definitely, yeah. And the final film that I saw was the new Will Smith, Martin Lawrence starring 4th installment of the Bad Boys franchise, Bad Boys Ride or Die. They completely missed the mark and blew it by not calling this one Bad Boys for Life. However, this was still a very enjoyable movie, a great addition to the franchise. The acting was great. The action sequences were really brutal. Too much use of the drone cinematography, in my personal opinion, and a lot of forced comedy. Get rid of all of that, and the movie is a solid 7 out of 10. But with all of that added, I would say it's about a 6.9 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that movie in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's too bad, because you and I did watch Bad Boys 2 not too long ago together.
Because that movie is fantastic and
It
one
really
of the
is.
best sequels ever made.
It absolutely fucking is. And of course, before seeing Bad Boys Ride or Die, I did go through the original trilogy. And Bad Boys for Life is very weak, but still an enjoyable movie. This one, though, some of the camera work was very Michael Bay influenced, which is awesome. At the same time, I am a Michael Bay fan. Michael Bay, of course, has a cameo in the movie, which is great. If you are a fan of the Bad Boys trilogy and now quadrilogy, check this one out. Check out The Watchers also, because we got to keep the theaters alive. And I know I always talk down on Netflix, but Hitman was definitely worth a watch. So I had a good time with all three of these movies over the last few days.
Great.
So, V, what did you see over the last few days?
Well, after our Sherman Brothers episode last week where we did a special bonus movie of the Boys documentary,
Yeah.
I was actually still on a documentary kick, so I dove into Disney Plus and watched the new Beach Boys and the new Jim Henson documentary that both just released.
Oh my gosh, Amy and I almost watched the Jim Henson documentary, but we ended up watching Frank and Ollie instead.
Well, that was also a documentary, wasn't it?
Oh, Frank and Ollie is definitely a documentary, but it came out in 1995. So I almost pushed play. Oh, for sure. Almost pushed play on the Jim Henson documentary, but now I'm very curious what you thought about that one.
Well, I'll go in watch order. I saw the Beach Boys first. I really liked it. I love the Beach Boys, and I've always had a lot of fun with their music. But at the same time, I hadn't really known their backstory, and so I was really curious to watch this. Overall, it's great. I think they were pretty honest. They did gloss over a couple of aspects, especially Brian Wilson's drug issues and the health problems he had because of that and how that affected him in the band. Their father, who managed them, though, is like Colonel Tom Parker for Elvis. And you want to rip your hair out in frustration because this guy was such a prick.
Oh, wow.
And it was so sad to watch. And there's one part of the movie that's a total gut punch. But I really loved watching the entire history of the Beach Boys, how they were rivals against the Beatles in certain ways. But because both bands were popular at the same time, they really pushed each other creatively in a really beautiful way. And I liked the perspective of that. And so overall, I really liked this movie. I think it was a little bit too long. I think the editing needed to be a little bit tighter. So it's on my movies you could miss list. But if you're a fan of the Beach Boys, highly recommend this film. And my favorite song of theirs, Kokomo, played it during the credits, so that made me really happy.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I do like Kokomo. I like the Muppets version of Kokomo.
And speaking of the Muppets, perfect transition. Thank you, sir, for that assist.
That was intentional.
And totally appreciated. The Jim Henson documentary, oh my God, talk about bringing me back to my childhood. We talk a lot about Disney influencing us, but Sesame Street was right there with Disney influencing me and really nurturing me as I grew up. And it covered all of Jim Henson's career, his personal life. They talked about Labyrinth for a little bit, which made me really happy.
Perfect.
I cried during this film.
Oh, wow.
It's fantastic. It's really well made. Ron Howard directed it. There's beautiful animation. The Muppets are a part of it. And there's just so many memories that you'll have and reminders of all the different projects this man worked on. And he reminded me a little bit of Hamilton in that he was always writing like he's running out of time, right? And that's one of the lines in Hamilton.
Why do you write like you're running out of time?
Exactly. And so how busy Jim Henson kept himself all the time. And he was just always running around and thinking of new things and working on new projects. It was just a beautiful documentary. It's absolutely on my movies you can't miss list of the year. I loved it. Great documentary. Highly recommend it.
Awesome. Like I said, we almost watched it, but went with Frank and Ollie because that one has been on my to-watch list for the last 15 years. So I will definitely watch the Jim Henson one over the next week or two.
Great. Well, it just premiered, so it'll be on Disney Plus now, probably in perpetuity.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right, those are the new 2024 movies we saw this week. We certainly love either recommending them to you or trying to steer you away from the movies we've seen.
Yes, and what's really interesting is I have actually enjoyed a lot more movies than you this year so far, I think.
There have been several on my movies you should not see list. That's true.
Yes, but that's the beauty of this podcast.
Well, and also the beauty of going to see the movies. And I'm still confident that the rest of this year is going to be more good than bad.
I think so.
So now it's time to dive into the topic of this week, movies based on Jane Austen novels, and I believe you go first.
Yes, let's get into it. Let's get into my pick from 2020. This film stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Bill Nighy, Mia Goth, Josh O'Connor, Callum Turner, Miranda Hart, and a whole handful of other fantastic cast members. This film, like V said, is based off of a Jane Austen novel. The film was adapted by Eleanor Catton. She wrote the screenplay. This film is directed by Autumn de Wilde. And I'm a big fan of this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's very sweet. It's very light. It's a PG-rated film, so it's not like it's going to be some, intense...
Bridgerton.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I've actually never seen Bridgerton, so I don't have anything to go off of from that. But based on what my wife, and now apparently what you and my wife have talked about based on that series, this is definitely not one of those Downton Abbey type of a British pieces of cinema.
There's no sex in it, that's for sure.
There is not, but we do see a bare ass, which is completely unnecessary in my opinion. And nothing against the fact that it's a man's ass. Yeah. I'm sure you did. It's just kind of like, well, why do we need that? But hey, you know what? Whatever. It still made a PG rating. And that scene actually is very interesting. We'll get into it in a minute because it's really only interesting because of how it happens. It's like one of those moments where it really kind of brings you into this 19th century, early 1800s wardrobe. And I mean, going off
daily life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, daily life. And just speaking on that real quickly, the costumes in this movie are ridiculous and just completely sumptuous, very vibrant, very of the time. So hats off to Alexandra Byrne for costume designing this film and being nominated for an Oscar for Best Costumes for this film.
Well deserved.
Very much so. This film centers on Emma, title character, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. She lives with her father, Mr. Woodhouse, played by Bill Nighy. Bill Nighy is a bit of a hypochondriac, very entertaining character. He embodies this character fantastically, and again, his costumes are very epic, and I just love watching him just about in any movie that he's ever been in. Anytime I see Bill Nighy, I'm usually a fan of the movie.
Oh, yes, and I think there's one coming up very shortly with him in it as well.
That's right, yes, my pick for next week. Actually, not mine, but my father's pick for next week for our Father's Day episode. But we'll get into that later. If you guys don't know who Bill Nighy is by name, I'm sure you will recognize him as Davy Jones from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He is also in Shaun of the Dead. He is also in...
Love Actually. He's the aging rocker.
That's right, Love Actually, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a never-ending resume for Bill Nighy. I mean, the guy's been around for decades and killing it in just about everything that he's been in. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Emma, which is the basis of this episode, Emma is a smart, handsome, witty, and clever young woman. This film opens up with her having very successfully played matchmaker to a young lady that has been attending to Emma and her father. Emma's very happy about this matchmaking. We are then taken to the wedding for Miss Taylor, who is being married off to Mr. Weston. Now, Miss Taylor is played by Gemma Whalen. She was actually Yara Greyjoy in Game of Thrones. Fantastic actress. I enjoy watching her in this movie, and I loved her progression in Game of Thrones. I thought she was just epic in that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was a great side character.
Oh, yeah. And during the wedding, we also meet Miss Bates, played by Miranda Hart, who is wonderful in this movie. We meet Mr. Elton, who is played by Josh O'Connor. Mr. Elton is actually the priest at this wedding. And after the wedding, we end up meeting Harriet Smith, who is one of Emma's very good friends from childhood. And Emma starts to think that since she's successfully matched up Miss Taylor with Mr. Weston, maybe she can play matchmaker to other people in her life. So she starts to kind of drop a little inceptions here and there throughout the rest of this movie with Harriet Smith, with Mr. Eldon, even with Frank Churchill, who ends up showing up a little bit later. And Emma is one of those women that is very hell-bent on not ever getting married. She has no interest in a relationship. She likes to paint. She likes to go about town. And she's a very big gossip. And she really likes to kind of dish it out to people. She likes to put them down, but in a British sort of, charming way, if that makes sense. So one night while Emma and her father and Harriet are all sitting around a fire, I really enjoy this scene because Mr. Knightley shows up and they spend a little bit of time talking back and forth, but I think my favorite part of this scene is the fact that Mr. Woodhouse he's sitting in his chair by the fire wrapped around these partitions. And anytime he feels a cool breeze or a draft or hears a fly or his hair moves, he's got to get up and move his seat. He has his two helpers kind of helping maneuver his things around, so he's in this like little, again, hypochondriac bubble. Very entertaining. And like I said, Mr. Knightley has shown up. He has grown up living next door to the Woodhouses. He and Emma grew up together as children. And now they're those two types of friends that have known each other so long that they pretty much say whatever comes to their minds about each other to each other. And I think that that's great because I have friends like that. V, I'm looking at you.
Yep.
I've got friends, I've had friends that way my entire life. And that's, the beauty of friendship is you can call each other out, but in a weird way, it's not like supposed to be insulting. But and now with Emma, everything seems to just kind of come off as a backhanded compliment. Emma is, again, very clever, very witty, very much about herself also. Like we learn kind of how selfish Emma really is throughout this
selfish.
whole thing. Very much so. And it works, to the story's favor that in a very strange way as you watch this movie, and as I've watched this movie now, this is the second time for me, you kind of, similar to like how we were talking about the villains in Disney movies last episode, she's kind of a villain, but at the same time, she's very captivating to watch. She's entertaining to watch. Anya Taylor-Joy is, she's been in so many movies now that if you don't know her by name, well, I'll list a couple of her credits, most notably, of course, right now, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. But I love her in The Witch, which was Robert Eggers' first film from many years ago, which is going to be on the October list of movies this year. She's also in The Menu with John Leguizamo, our buddy.
God, she's so good in that movie.
She's fantastic in that movie. She's also in a movie called Thoroughbreds. She's in Split with James McAvoy. And The Northman, another Robert Eggers movie, which I was a big fan of, but V didn't like the last 13 minutes of.
That's true, but she also was more recently in Dune Part 2, and she did a very tiny, itty-bitty little part, but she was still awesome.
Yeah, like 45 seconds. It was awesome.
And I'm a big fan of her, too. She's a great actress. Like you said, she is very captivating. She's great in this movie, and it was certainly important casting because you needed someone to fill the shoes of this unlikable character who was still endearing enough to be lovable.
Yes.
And you can't just have any actress do that. They have to have enough charisma to draw the audience in to love her enough to see her through the whole movie. Because through a big portion of this movie, she's kind of an asshole.
Oh, big time. Yeah. There's a moment later on in the movie between her and Miss Bates that is like such a realization moment for Emma. And it really brings her down to earth, too, because Mr. Knightley completely chews her out for it. And watching it this time around, I had completely forgotten about that moment.
Right.
So when she says what she says to her, and you just see Miss Bates just completely crumble, is like, I loved Miss Bates when she showed up. Like in the church when she's like trying to get her attention, and then later on when her and Harriet are in that fabric store, and she comes running in, she's like, I saw you from outside. Or no, she goes, well, let's just listen to this. I like this moment really a lot.
Miss Woodhouse, what's the matter?
Miss Woodhouse! Miss Woodhouse! How do you do? And you, Miss Smith? I saw you through the window. Miss Woodhouse, I bring happy news. We've had a letter this very morning from my niece, Jane Fairfax.
I hope that she's well.
In normal course, she writes on a Tuesday. But today, her health. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, you are so very kind to inquire. Poor Jane. She was at Weymouth with Colonel Campbell. And where is the letter? Oh, it must not be far off. Such an unexpected... Oh, it's on the glove stand. It was with the gloves. Yes, at Weymouth with Colonel Campbell and his wife and Jane's dear friend, Miss Campbell, who is recently married. She is Mrs. Dixon now. And, oh dear, Mr. Dixon, who is the most charming young man, rendered to Jane a great service in recent days. They were, too pretty.
And I think Miranda Hart was the perfect casting for that role. I have only seen her in a couple things, but one of them was that Melissa McCarthy movie Spy, and she plays the tall, skinny friend in it, and God, she's hysterical in that movie. And seeing her in this, she just embodied this sweet character who's a little bit annoying, but still lovable because she has such great intentions. And she just embodied that so well. It was perfect casting.
It really was, yeah. And like you said, she is kind of an annoying friend. And you, of course, every time she shows up, Emma rolls her eyes and it's kind of like, can we just get away from this person? Mm-hmm. And we all have people like that in our lives. Even now, I'm sure that, V, you have people like that. I mean, you're probably looking at them right now.
Oh man, but you're right. That scene with Miss Bates and Emma is so hard to watch. But you make a really good point. That scene has to happen in order for Emma to grow as a character, and which
Very
is
much
so crucial to this storyline. So you're right. I hate that scene, but it's so important, and you've actually added some weight to it now that we're discussing it. So I respect that scene a lot more than I did. And it's funny because this is the second time I've watched this movie too.
Oh, sweet. Awesome. I watched it with Amy, and when that moment happens, I literally, my jaw dropped. I was like, oh,
I bet Amy hates that scene.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Secondhand embarrassment.
Definitely, yeah, of course, yeah. Amy hates that the most in any TV show or movie that her and I watch together. Yeah. But like you said, it has to happen. It really brings Emma down to earth. It brings Emma out of her selfishness also, because later on, as Mr. Knightley is really kind of digging into her about what she has just done and what she has said to the sweetest woman in all of Highbury, Emma realizes that, wow, I kind of am a bitch. Like, I really need to kind of grow up a little bit, and of course this comes with that high society kind of life, and that's another reason why I think I like this movie. Is not only is Anya Taylor-Joy great at being a gossip and being witty and playing this matchmaker to her friends and for Harriet and Mr. Elton and all of that, but again, there's just so much humanity in her. And I've only read one Jane Austen novel, which was Persuasion. Finishing this movie, I was kind of like, I wouldn't mind reading Emma and seeing, how it compares as a movie and a novel. And like I said, I have seen the Gwyneth Paltrow version. I liked the Gwyneth Paltrow version. My wife actually prefers that one over this one.
Really?
But, yeah. Well, my wife is a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan, so.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, V.
Yeah. Well, for our audience, let us know which version you prefer.
I'm very curious, yes, because this one is 24 years after the Gwyneth Paltrow version. So, and again, it's not updated. The dialogue is still very much of the time. Costumes are amazing. The hair and makeup is great. The hair, especially. I mean, Emma's hair is always awesome. Harriet's hair, Mia Goth's hair is great. Even all the gentlemen's hairs, Johnny Flynn, who plays Mr. Knightley, he's got, it seems like bedhead, but it's so like English that you're kind of like, yeah, like
it works.
Maybe, yeah, it's almost like a weird type of a mullet, but not really. It's just so interesting. And, again, we meet Frank Churchill, who's played by Callum Turner, and he ends up kind of bringing Emma a little bit more also back to earth. And for the rest of the movie, we're just watching Emma grow out of being this selfish little prissy high society, completely spoiled, into more of a mature woman and not so much, again, just this spoiled little child. And I love that about the movie, too. I love the growth of just about every character, including Harriet Smith. I love Mr. Elton's whole growth as well. Miss Bates also has a little bit of growth in this movie. And it's just a very entertaining, very sumptuous film. And, the soundtrack is great. Cannot stop talking about the costumes because they are just fantastic.
Cinematography and editing in this movie is so fantastic. Cutting
absolutely
from scene
gorgeous.
to scene where everyone's lined up or the buildings are lined up, or God, I love when they do that. And
it's very symmetrical.
It is. It's gorgeous.
And a lot of the interiors of the locations just kind of look like you could cut into them like a cake.
Like a cake, yeah. That's what I was thinking too.
So crazy.
It's so true.
When Mr. Woodhouse first walks into that pink room, I was just like, man, this looks like a cake that Amy just baked, and he's walking through it. Yeah. I want to dig into it. Kind of reminded me of like that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids moment when they go onto the that cream pie, and it's just kind of like, I would love to just dig into that and eat that strawberry icing of wallpaper that they have right there.
And watching the movie this time around, especially because we watched Atonement a couple weeks ago, I really thought of Emma being a lot like Bryony in a lot of ways. She's a little bit more lovable. But she's in her own world. She's extremely self-involved and selfish. She thinks she knows best. And I saw a lot of parallels there.
That's actually a solid point. Yeah, good point. I like that. I will agree with you as well.
But she's certainly a lot more likable than Bryony.
That is for sure. Yes. Oh, Atonement. What a film.
So glad you loved it.
Oh, yeah, I very much did. We'll discuss some similarities to your pick as well. Jane Fairfax, she plays the niece of Miss Bates, and she, when she shows up, I like that scene between all of them that are in that room where she's just like belting out that Mozart. And,
God.
Emma's just looking at her just kind of like, you are like, you're totally taking my fire out of this whole thing.
Well, I love that Emma gets brought down a couple pegs because it starts
Yes.
off with Emma playing the pianoforte or
Yes.
piano and thinking that she's so great and everybody's enthralled by her and
Oh, yeah.
she's so talented. And then Jane Fairfax, who's nice and quiet, goes, well, I guess I'll play a piece, and everybody's encouraging her. She's like, well, if I can
Yeah.
remember the music, and then she just like busts
She
out
just-
this Mozart and just
yeah.
like destroys Emma. It
Yeah.
was so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, you needed to be brought down a couple pegs.
Completely agree. And actually, the very cool thing about that scene is both Anya and Amber Anderson, who plays Jane Fairfax, ended up playing all the music on set for real. This is, nothing superimposed, nothing like that. And Anya Taylor-Joy sang while she played the piano as well.
Awesome.
I know, it was very, very cool. And you know me with actors and actresses that actually learn the music, unlike several movies that we've talked about where the actors did not take the time to do that. They're either superimposed over or the cameras are just up on their faces. So hats off to the ladies for definitely belting that out and doing a great job.
You'll like a piece of trivia from my movie then.
Oh, can't wait, can't wait. Like I said, this film is set in Highbury, England. That's a city just outside of London, England. And very appropriately, this film was also shot entirely on location in England, so none of this is actually staged, which is amazing. So when you and I end up doing the Camino el de Santiago, maybe we can take a detour and go check out the locations from the 2020 Emma.
Oh, and so many great locations in England. We could spend a lot of time in there.
Oh, that's very true. All the pubs, too.
Of course.
I've been to London one time, and I had a great, great time. It was in 2001. It was a wonderful city. We didn't really venture out too much outside of the city of London, but I really enjoyed checking out, Big Ben and the Tower of London and Parliament and all that stuff. I even did the London Eye, which was awesome. But again, this was a long, long time ago. So, a little bit more about Emma. Principal photography began on March 18th of 2019. They ended up wrapping on June 6th of 2019, which is a pretty short schedule. It's
Yeah.
just under 3 months. Pre-production began in October of 2018. Anya Taylor-Joy was the first to be cast. The rest of the cast was not locked in until March of 2019. So there you go. And that happens often with certain films, and actually most films, like, oh, we don't have anybody to play this role, and we're going to shoot that scene in 3 days, and then, they cast somebody. There is a scene in this movie also later on where Mr. Knightley and Emma are doing a dance, and very similar, V, to your pick, they do the whole line up and walk around each other and have discussions with all their friends, and then they break in conversation until they're standing next to each other again. And I really liked the choreography of that in this movie in particular, because so much is happening between Emma and Harriet and Mr. Knightley and Mr. Elton and then Frank Churchill. They're all just they're all involved in different conversations. And then at one point, since this is after dinner, I don't know if you noticed, but Emma and Mr. Knightley actually did not have gloves on, but everybody else did.
No, I didn't notice that.
The glove detail for this scene actually is based on fact. Especially after dinner, everybody would put their gloves back on because it was just high society. It was polite society. Polite Society is a different movie, but still a great movie. Mr. Knightley and Emma don't have their gloves on, and the reason for that was because Autumn de Wilde, the director, wanted there to be a flame of sexual tension that started to build between Mr. Knightley and Emma.
I love little seeds planted like that throughout the movie that maybe you don't even catch them, but they are important to quality storytelling.
Yeah. So, before I get into a little bit more of the behind the scenes on this film, V, I apologize that it's taken me this long, but I'm very curious, since you said this was your second time watching this movie, similar to myself. What did you think on your second time around?
I have loved this film both times I've seen it, although I like it better the second time, and now talking to you about it, I'm realizing a lot of subtext within the movie that is important for the character growth of Emma, which is important for me because it's hard for me to watch movies with unlikable characters.
Right.
And it's also hard for me to watch movies set in this time period, same as my pick this week, actually, because their lives are so tedious and all they do is gossip and all they are pretentious. And I'm just... could never, ever live in this time period. I would be burned at the stake, or I'd be a penniless old shrew on the street, or hopefully dress like a man and become a musician instead and just play at all the parties that these rich assholes have.
or be an actor that plays a man in a Shakespeare play, and
like in Shakespeare,
then find out that woman is a woman.
That woman is a woman. God, I love that line so much, even though that movie sucks.
Yes.
So I do.
I'm a fan of it, though.
Which is fair. I mean, I would hate it less if it wasn't attached to Harvey Weinstein and the whole Oscar campaign.
Oh, yeah.
But this movie, like you said, is just a feast for the eyes. Every shot is gorgeous. Every costume is beautiful as well. And that is just one of the great pleasures of watching these movies is the scenery.
Yes, definitely.
And so I had a great time watching it. I think the pairing this week is a lot of fun and really perfect. And I'm really glad we decided to go with a Jane Austen theme this week. It's a little bit kind of outside our wheelhouse in terms of the movies
Very much so.
Typically watch, but I really like that we could talk about movies that maybe people are surprised that we like as much as we do.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a surprise for a lot of people. I hope it is anyway. You know, I don't turn my nose up to any genre, really. And I do like movies like this that are set way back when, you know, and especially when they're based on a piece of literature. And again, I've only read one Jane Austen novel, but the fact that this is an adaptation of, this was actually the last novel that Jane Austen had published during her lifetime.
Oh,
so
okay.
After she had passed, she had a couple other ones that were published, and I don't actually know what they were. So Allison, if you would fill us in a comment or send a message to let us know, since you are the Jane Austen fan that you are, Allison actually goes to Jane Austen festivals like across the country.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I'll have to send you her Instagram because she actually gets dressed up like some of these characters.
Nice.
She makes the costumes. Like, she's actually a very talented woman. She's hilarious. The cocktails that we've done on Instagram Live in the past have been delicious. And I kind of screwed up one day by saying, your costumes are crazy, but I tried to say crazy awesome, but I couldn't get awesome out of my mouth because I was, for whatever reason, I was like, yeah, your costumes are crazy. And I just kind of like kept going. So Allison, I know I kept apologizing for it back then and still do, and I will always feel bad for that. But there's a movie out there called Austenland with Kerry Russell, and it's about all these women that are fans of Jane Austen and go to this, you know, Jane Austen festival and sit around and gossip and drink tea and eat cakes and all this kind of stuff. And it's so fascinating.
Tea
and Amy's
sandwiches.
like, oh, I want to go. Yeah, exactly. Yes, high tea, high society, all that kind of stuff. So I guess going back to it, yes, I am a fan of movies like this. You know, your pick this week, I'm a fan of. The reason why I originally wanted to watch this movie was because, A, my wife is a big fan of the 1996 version with Gwyneth Paltrow. We watched that one a few years ago. And then I saw that this one had come out, and I'm, of course, like I've mentioned, a big Anya Taylor-Joy fan. So luckily, we watched it, enjoyed it, and kind of opened my eyes a little bit more to more Jane Austen. And like I said, I kind of feel like reading the novel of Emma now that I have become more of a fan of this movie for the podcast.
I think you should. She was a great writer, and I love that a lot of the messages she had in her writing was, don't try to change the man, just wait until he grows up and changes himself, which I really can get behind.
I think most women can, especially with their husbands. I'm sure my wife feels that way all the time.
And you're right, this supporting cast is full of wonderful English actors. As you said, Josh O'Connor plays Mr. Elton, and he actually is the younger man version of Prince Charles in The Crown. I believe it's season 3 that he plays Prince Charles. And he also is more recently in Challengers, the movie with Zendaya that I've told you about.
Oh, is he really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And even little bit parts like Mr. Weston, he's played by Rupert Graves, who played Inspector Lestrade in the Sherlock Holmes series with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Ah.
So I recognize even him.
I have not seen any of those.
Oh, they're fantastic. And I believe...
Yeah, you've mentioned that I should watch them.
And they're actually now on Hulu, so you can give them a try.
Oh, well, I think I'm going to have to then. Now, like I said, this movie was nominated for Best Costume Design at the Oscars that year. It was also nominated for Best Hair and Makeup, so congratulations to everybody involved in the hair and makeup and costume department. I can only imagine how early everybody, including the background, had to get there to get into their costumes. So hats off to everybody that was involved in getting everybody dressed for a day of shooting. This was nominated for a Golden Globe. Anya Taylor-Joy was nominated for Best Actress.
Oh, nice. I'm assuming in the comedy category.
Yes, absolutely. The budget was $10 million.
Really? That's all?
Yeah, I know, right? With all the locations and everything.
And all the costumes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, pretty wild. The U.S. gross ended up being $10 million.
Oh, okay.
The worldwide gross, though, came to 26.4, so it did all right.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Okay. Yeah.
Especially with Oscar nominations and BAFTAs and Golden Globe nominees.
Mm-hmm.
The UK release for Emma, February 14th of 2020 in the UK.
Oh, nice.
Yes. The U.S. limited release was February 21st of 2020, and the worldwide release was March 6th of 2020.
I remember it coming out in 2020 and being able to stream it and really enjoying it with my sister.
Yeah, and likewise, like I said, we watched it on streaming because for whatever reason, we missed it in theaters, which was very upsetting.
Because it was beginning of 2020 and all the theaters were closed because it was the pandemic.
That's right. Yeah,
that's why it was right on streaming.
Pandemic. Stupid COVID. But anyway, so that is Emma from 2020, based off the Jane Austen novel. Now, 2020 was an interesting box office year, and I'm going to do the worldwide box office because this was a UK release before it was released in the United States.
Great.
So the highest grossing film of 2020 is a film that I have not seen called 800.
Oh, is that a Chinese film?
I think so, yes. The second highest grossing film was a movie that was an anime film called Demon Slayer.
Okay.
The third highest grossing film of 2020, Bad Boys for Life.
Oh my God.
The fifth highest grossing film, a pick of mine for episode 60, one of my most favorite Christopher Nolan films with John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, Tenet.
I love that film so much.
Me too. It's pretty incredible. The sixth highest grossing film, Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik in the first Sonic the Hedgehog film, which is actually awesome. I'm a big fan of the two Sonic Hedgehog films. Can't wait for the third one. The seventh highest grossing film, Robert Downey Jr. in Doolittle.
Ugh, didn't even bother watching that film.
Neither did I. The 11th highest grossing film, Margot Robbie and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Keeping the Kids Safe in The Emancipation of One Harley Quinn or Birds of Prey. Now, the 13th highest grossing film of 2020 was a movie that pretty much went straight to streaming and was not a good sequel at all, Wonder Woman 84.
Oh, God. The biggest lie ever was that amazing trailer that was one of the coolest trailers I ever saw, and then just the biggest pile of crap movie.
That movie was
came
pretty
from two different
awful.
places.
I always said that the opening of Wonder Woman 84 was a perfect sequel to Wonder Woman, and they should have just left it at that.
That's a good one.
The 16th highest grossing film, a movie that Amy and I saw at the El Capitan, but I did not enjoy it very much, and I will one day maybe revisit it. Onward.
Oh, yeah, I like that movie. I cry.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to like it. I guess I just missed it. I don't know.
It's kind of forgettable, but I love it every time I watch it.
Very much so. Oh, so you've seen it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, okay. 18th highest grossing film, my pick for episode 29. The first time that I almost audibly cried on the podcast, Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey in Pixar's Soul.
That was such a wonderful moment that you were so passionate about your pick. I really did love that episode.
I love that movie very much. It's so fantastic. The 22nd highest grossing film, the live-action Mulan, which I still have not seen.
Because why would you?
It looked like it would be good. The 27th highest grossing film that year, Gerard Butler in Greenland, which is a badass movie.
Haven't seen it.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Number 41, Kristen Stewart in Underwater, which is a fun monster flick.
Cool.
You haven't seen that one?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. The 77th highest grossing film of 2020 was Vince Vaughn in Freaky, which is a very entertaining film.
I love that film.
Yes, I did as well, and I believe we will have the costume designer on our podcast sometime soon. Her name is Whitney Ann Adams, and she has a podcast herself, so check that one out. Tales of a Costume Designer, very entertaining podcast. And the 57th highest grossing film of 2020, my pick for this week, Emma.
Awesome. Top 100.
Yeah, top 100. And if you care to check out Emma with Anya Taylor-Joy, Bill Nye, and Mia Goth, it is available for free streaming on Amazon Prime in 4K.
No wonder it was so beautiful on my TV.
Right? Yeah, it was pretty sexy. All right, well, that closes this Jane Austen novel. I think we're ready to open another one, V. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Sweet. Let's get into it.
We are going to go back several years, not only in the release date of this movie, but also the publication date of the book it was based on, because Emma, as you said, was the last novel that Jane Austen was able to publish in her lifetime, and I believe that's 1815. The novel that my movie is based upon, Pride and Prejudice, was released in 1813.
Ah.
Your movie came out in 2020. Mine came out in 2005.
Oh my gosh, really? It was 2005?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was an early Keira Knightley credit.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the movie I chose this week, Pride and Prejudice, starring Keira Knightley, Matthew McFadden, Donald Sutherland, Rosamund Pike, Carey Mulligan, Kelly Riley. And I love this movie. I've seen it multiple times, especially because it's been on a lot of streaming services over the years. And so every time it pops up, I'm like, yeah, let me give this a watch again. And I believe it's the first time you've ever seen it.
It was the first time I've seen this rendition of Pride and Prejudice.
Okay, so we're going to get into your experience watching it for the first time then in a little bit. But before we do that, as we always do, I'm going to dive into the plot a little bit. And similar to your film, there's a lot of unlikable characters.
That's for sure.
The Bennet family is not well-to-do, unlike your film. Instead, they are pretty meager, although they do have servants.
Yes.
But they are certainly considered lower class, especially by high society.
Right.
Their dress is a lot more drab than Emma and Mr. Woodhouse, that's for sure.
Oh, yes.
They wear a lot of browns.
They really do. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of color scheme in Pride and Prejudice.
No, there really isn't, but the scenery is beautiful, so that certainly makes up for it. And Mr. Bennet has the unfortunate lot of having 5 daughters.
Oh, yeah.
I say unfortunate because back in the day, that means he has to marry them off and provide dowries for them, and that's a big responsibility. My father only had 4 daughters and does not have to give a dowry for any of us.
Nice. Good for him.
Yes, thank God for being born in the 20th century.
Yeah.
The Bennet's oldest is named Jane. She's played by Rosamund Pike. Now, I first saw Rosamund Pike in a James Bond movie, actually.
Oh.
She's in the Pierce Brosnan Die Another Day. She plays Miranda Frost.
Oh.
And then I saw her in Jack Reacher, the Tom Cruise movie. She plays Helen, the lawyer, and she's awesome in it.
Yeah, I've not seen the Jack Reacher, but I have seen Die Another Day.
Oh, okay, a James Bond movie you've seen. That's awesome.
I've seen all the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies and Octopussy with Sean Connery.
Not Sean Connery.
I know, that was the joke.
Oh, okay. I was about to smack you upside the head. And lastly, Rosamund Pike is recognizable from the film Gone Girl.
Oh, yeah.
And in this movie, though, she is very sweet. She's very shy. She's very introverted and very beautiful.
Yes.
And so when very rich Mr. Bingley comes to town, and like your movie, this story is set outside of London in a smaller town, Mrs. Bennet, who's played by Brenda Blevin and is so, oh my God, she's like a hen. She's so obnoxious and annoying. I cannot stand this woman.
Yeah, she was pretty insufferable, but also a joy to watch.
Yes, she's just clucking about and all over trying to marry your daughters and oh God. But she gets really excited because she believes Jane, her oldest, is also the most beautiful daughter in the family. And so she tries to set up Mr. Bingley and Jane. Keira Knightley plays the second sister, Elizabeth Bennet, and she, similar to Emma, isn't really interested in a relationship or getting married off, and she just really likes having fun with her sisters and reading and doing her own thing. And so when Mr. Bingley's friend, Mr. Darcy, joins him in the countryside and therefore in this little town, she immediately starts verbally sparring with him because she finds him the most pretentious asshole she's ever met.
Yes, yeah, I like that moment.
He's a big pain to talk to. He really gives monosyllabic answers. And she even overhears him kind of talking shit about her and her family in one of these little parties that they always used to have back in the 1800s, it seems.
It really does seem like just about every movie set like this is like, are you going to the ball? And then it's like, can I have this dance? And, and there's like a 4-person concerto that's just like playing the violin and whatnot. And they're just bouncing around and bowing to each other.
Well, I mean, there was really nothing else to do.
I guess that's true, yeah. Yeah. And they do read a lot, but
they do.
And it's always like that was one thing actually watching Emma. Sorry to go back to Emma, but she's reading and then Mr. Knightley's reading. And it's like, what are they reading? Like, it's like, they reading King Arthur? Are they reading what are they reading? I was always curious.
Well, the funny thing is, in the very beginning of this movie, Elizabeth Bennet is actually reading an edition of Pride and Prejudice written by Jane Austen.
Oh, that's cool. What a nice little Easter egg.
Yes. And other than, dying in childbirth and consumption and all that horribleness, it seems like a pretty nice time to be alive because you really get to be out in nature and read whenever the hell you want and then just dance in nighttime. I mean,
yeah,
that sounds like
drink
fun.
Drink wine and tear a pheasant.
Yeah. And then, of course, comes the patriarchy. So Elizabeth is having nothing of this while Mr. Bingley and Jane are having their little courtship. And instead, she continues to run into Mr. Darcy, much to both of their disappointment because they don't like each other.
No, not at all.
And while this is all going on, of course, her little sisters are out as well and trying to find husbands. And part of me would want to get married off just to get out of that house because it was so loud all the time with all these women in it.
Yeah, like you said, Mrs. Bennet is very much a hen and clucking about, yes. As are the younger sisters. Played, I think one of them was Carey Mulligan.
It was Carey Mulligan's first ever audition, ever movie.
Very cool. I liked her in this movie.
I liked her in this movie too. One of her sisters is also played by Jenna Malone. Neither John nor I like her. I've actually worked with her. She is very much like her character in this movie.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Such a weird casting. Why was she cast in this movie?
Because think of the character she has to play. It was kind of perfect.
I guess, but there wasn't a British actress that could have done that better?
True, because she and Donald Sutherland are the only non-English actors. They're American actors in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny when I watched this, I was like, oh, it's Donald Sutherland. He's the father. And I was like, but he's not British. Well, it's a movie. And then, I go back to several movies where, like, a movie set in the early, colonies of America, and all of the actors are American but played by Australian men or British men or,
yes.
and whatnot. So, I get it. It's acting. Cool. But Jenna Malone?
Yeah, right. So...
Moving on.
Yes, exactly. And things really get worse for Mr. Darcy and Miss Bennet because he then convinces Mr. Bingley to go back to London and forget about Jane because she's really lower class and so is the rest of her family. And her whole family is really quite embarrassing for the aristocracy and higher classes, and they don't really want to be attached to people like that, of that sort, as it were.
Right.
And of course, Elizabeth Bennet hears about this and hates Mr. Darcy even more.
Oh, yeah.
And then soldiers come to town, including a man named Mr. Wickham, who Jenna Malone's character actually falls in love with quite quickly. And Mr. Wickham ends up telling Elizabeth how he used to know Mr. Darcy, and in fact, they grew up together. And as soon as his father died, Mr. Darcy cut him out of any sort of inheritance or help and kicked him off the property, and that's why he's only a lowly soldier. And this story enrages Elizabeth Bennet, and this really makes them enemies in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when we get introduced to a love interest of Elizabeth Bennet's, although she doesn't see it that way.
Not at all.
Mr. Collins, who's a cousin of theirs, who will actually inherit this property if the women aren't married off. Mr. Collins is a lot like Mr. Elton in your movie. He's a clergyman.
Yes.
And he works on a grand estate. And... he is really looking for a wife and decided that Elizabeth is going to be it.
Yes, that was very entertaining.
It really was. And that's actually one of the scenes that I wanted to include in the audio clip of this week because it's just so good.
Oh, perfect.
And now, nothing remains but for me to assure you in the most animated language of the violence of my affection.
Mr. Collins!
And that no reproach on the subject of fortune will cross my lips once we're married.
You are too hasty, sir. You forget that I have given no answer.
I must add that Lady Catherine will thoroughly approve when I speak to her of your modesty, economy, and other amiable qualities.
Sir, I am honoured by your proposal, but I regret that I must decline it.
I know ladies don't seek to seem too eager.
Mr. Collins, I am perfectly serious. You could not make me happy, and I'm convinced I'm the last woman in the world who could make you happy.
I flatter myself, cousin, that your refusal is merely a natural delicacy. Besides, you should take into account that despite your manifold attractions, it's by no means certain that another offer of marriage may ever be made to you.
Mr. Collins!
So I must conclude that you simply seek to increase my love by suspense.
Sir.
According to the usual practice of elegant females.
Sir. I am not the sort of female to torment a respectable man. Please understand me, I cannot accept you.
Because when he proposes, Miss Bennet, the mother, is actually really excited. You'll save this family and you'll save this property. You have to marry him. What sort of prospects do you have? And she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not. And please, Father, help me.
Tell
You insist upon them marrying.
Papa, please.
You will have this house.
I can't marry
and
him.
save your sisters from destitution.
I can't.
Go back now and say you've changed your mind.
No.
Think of your family.
You cannot make me.
Mr. Bennett, say something.
So, your mother insists on you marrying Mr. Collins.
Yes, or I shall never see her again.
Lizzie, from this day onward, you must be a stranger to one of your
Who
parents.
will maintain you when your father is dead?
Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Papa.
Ungrateful child! I shall never speak to you again. Not that I take much pleasure in talking.
And one of the reasons why I picked that scene is because I really wanted to illustrate the differences in characters between Mr. Bennet and Ms. Bennet. And now you understand the kind of mother that Elizabeth has to put up with.
Oh, yeah.
But at one point, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy actually run into each other again. And this is the point where things get a little bit complicated because, in fact, Mr. Darcy meets Elizabeth at this water temple outside, and it's very beautiful. And he says, I'm sorry, I'm shy, and I'm not good with people, and I'm not good with words, but I love you.
Yeah.
And
So blatant about it.
She's like, what are you talking about? I hate you. I loathe you. I will never marry you. I have no interest in marrying you. From all accounts, including everybody I've talked to, you are the biggest asshole in the entire town. And these are all the reasons why I'll never marry you. He, of course, has the wind taken out of his sails.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this. And from there, similar to your film, there's this catalyzing event, right? With Emma, there is when she's talking to Miss Bates.
Yes.
And for Pride and Prejudice, it's when Mr. Darcy declares his love, surprisingly, to Elizabeth. And that's when Elizabeth starts to grow a little bit, and she actually starts to learn a lot more about Mr. Darcy. And all of these facts start becoming clearer. And she really has to wade through what's gossip and what's fact, and who Mr. Darcy really is. And is he this pretentious, pompous, prideful man who is everything she's always thought he was?
Mm-hmm.
Or, as I like to say, do still waters run deep?
Ah.
Is Mr. Darcy, in fact, just a really shy, awkward guy? And the rest of the movie, Elizabeth and the audience go on a bit of an investigation and discovery of who Mr. Darcy really is, if Mr. Bingley is a stand-up guy and is not going to leave Jane brokenhearted, are the rest of her sisters going to be married off, and is Mr. Collins going to take the hint and get the hell out of there?
So true.
And Mr. Collins is played by Tom Hollander, who actually plays Cutler Beckett in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, so this is not the only time he and Keira Knightley work together.
I love him in the Pirates movies.
Me too. Oh, God, he's such an arrogant prick in those movies. He's so good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this really displays his acting range because he's the polar opposite in this film.
Definitely, yeah. And he actually will be in a pick of mine in the very near future as well.
And similar to Emma, there's changing of the seasons in this film. Title cards are used for Emma, and shots of the same location, the farm, are used for Pride and Prejudice. And I really like how that's shown, because the passage of time is usually really important in storytelling to show the richness of the story that's being developed.
Yeah. I like how it's used in Emma, definitely.
And the cinematography is really similar too, because this is also a gorgeous film, right?
It's very beautiful, yeah.
And there's also two versions of this film.
That's right, there are.
There's an extra scene at the very end in the US version, and so John, I'm curious not only if you enjoyed watching this film, but what version you watched.
I apparently, after you and I had a quick talk about this movie in particular, I watched the American cut. So I have not seen the United Kingdom version.
And what'd you think about the film?
I thought it was all right. I wasn't like super taken with it, I'll be honest with you. And I think the problem with that is the fact that I have seen this movie before. I've seen it with zombies, and I loved Pride and Prejudice and Zombies a lot, and I do still love that movie, as cheeseball as it is with Lily James and Sam Riley and a whole handful of actors, including Lena Headey and Charles Dance. Great movie, a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, check it out, especially you, Allison. I'm sure you have, since you are a Jane Austen fan. But it's funny because when I saw Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, I did not know that it was actually like a true adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, just with the addition of zombies in it. So when I was watching this, I was sitting with my wife and I was like, oh, so Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is literally this movie and story just with zombies added into it. And Amy's like, yeah, you didn't know that? I'm like, well, I guess it's a retelling. Anyway, Keira Knightley's great. I thought Rosamund Pike was fantastic. I thought that everybody really brought it in this movie. I will say, though, that I thought the guy that plays Mr. Darcy, what's his name? Matthew something?
Matthew McFadden?
Yeah, I guess he's attractive to women in Britain.
So there was a
nothing
big
against him
uproar when he was cast in this film back in 2005.
Really?
A lot of people thought it was bad casting.
I'm going to have to agree with that one. And not that, we need some chiseled looking, SOB to play Mr. Darcy, but
Hugh Jackman?
No, we don't need Hugh Jackman to play Mr. Darcy.
Okay.
No, that's too beautiful.
Yeah.
No. It's funny though, it's like, who could it be? And again, acting, like Giovanna Ribisi could have been cool. Maybe. And I get it,
Like non-traditional good looking?
Yeah, non-traditional good looking. Like, I don't know. It was so weird because he shows up and I look at my wife and I'm like, that's Mr. Darcy, huh? Interesting. And my wife goes, yeah, he's no Colin Firth. And I was like, I guess he's not, obviously. And then I was like, well, he's not really attractive either. I'm like, well, Colin Firth is a lot more handsome than this guy. And again, no offense to you, sir. Just, it is what it is. So I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only person that had a problem with that if there was a major uproar in the casting for this. No, again, nothing against him. He still played the part very well. I definitely did not like him until, things started to come to light about his past and whatnot. I hated Jenna Malone. I don't like her, and we have established that, I think, 4 different times on this podcast.
Yeah.
Carrie Mulligan was adorable, and as was the youngest sister. I thought she was great. I loved Tom Hollander because when he showed up, I was like, oh my God, it's Lord Beckett. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I loved that dinner scene when he's just like, delicious boiled potatoes.
God,
it's so funny, so dry, so drab. And Amy went on a quest to see if anybody had turned that into a t-shirt. And of course, it's all over the internet. And I was like, well, you got to get yourself one of those and get me one too. But I thought he was great. And I loved the scene when Collins proposes to Elizabeth and she's like, no, and runs out of the house. And then Mrs. Bennet chases her down and he's like, don't worry, Mr. Collins. And with all the geese and everything like that, I thought that was great. So overall, I'd give it a strong 7 out of 10.
Okay.
Again, the casting was great. The music was awesome. Beautiful cinematography, great landscape. And again, very similar to Emma, that dance sequence where everybody is dancing together and having a multitude of conversations. I really liked that scene, I think, the most out of the entire movie.
Okay.
And now that I've seen an actual full adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, I do like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies a little bit more because now I have an understanding of the fact that it actually is a true adaptation with the addition of zombies and bloody, insane violence. For being a PG-13 movie.
Loyal to the source material.
Yeah, it really is, and it was really, really cool. But in a serious world, of course, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people well, no, the Keira Knightley version's better. I did see the Zombies version first. You know how that goes. Whichever one you see first and you like, that's the one you're gonna go with. But I enjoyed it. It's not like Atonement though for me.
Right.
It's not like something that I'm gonna be like, oh, if this is a 4K, I'm grabbing this one. I don't think I ever need to watch this version again.
Okay.
Whereas I have the Zombies version on Blu-ray, and I watch that every Halloween.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you didn't hate it, first and foremost. And now that I'm thinking about alternate casting for Mr. Darcy, and we're thinking of unconventionally attractive men for Mr. Darcy,
yeah,
I'm thinking Adam Driver, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Benedict Cumberbatch, I could have seen a little.
Domhnall Gleeson?
Domhnall Gleeson would have been cool.
Right?
Yeah. I think I have a problem with Adam Driver and his accents, as much as I liked House of Gucci.
Well, you've only seen him in Italian accents, which are notoriously hard and also awful for Americans to do.
That's very true. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, yeah, no, I'll give you that. But I could see Benedict Cumberbatch, that he could be good. It would have been cool. Sam Riley. He plays Mr. Darcy in the Zombies version. Why not bring him into the Keira Knightley one? I don't know if he would have been old enough. No, he would have been old.
Oh, well, forget about time. This is just...
Sam Riley was in Maleficent. He plays the Raven that she has on his shoulder.
Oh, yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, he's a cool actor. I like him quite a bit. And oddly enough, in the Zombies version, Matt Smith, who is one of the Doctor Who's, plays Parson Collins, and he is hysterical.
Matt Smith would have been a great Mr. Darcy.
Yeah, he actually would have been a cool Mr. Darcy for this version. Yeah.
Yes, I could see that
Definitely.
for sure. Alternate universe casting, that would be good.
Yeah.
Well, now it's time to talk about the actual casting in this film then.
Yes, let's do it.
Keira Knightley is Elizabeth Bennet, and a couple episodes ago, actually only 4, we did Atonement. Well, I did Atonement, I guess. It was my pick. I should take responsibility for it. But you loved it. It was it was your introduction to that film, and you loved it, so I'm happy about that. This is actually the first feature film directed by Joe Wright, who also directed Atonement. So this is the first time he and Keira had worked together.
Awesome.
And as we said, Keira Knightley is, of course, in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and quite recognizable. And I love that they work together multiple times because I love both of these films, Pride and Prejudice and Atonement. I'm sorry you didn't love it as much as I do, but I'm really glad that you loved Atonement. I liked this one. Yeah, and now you've seen them work together a couple times, which is cool.
It does make me want to watch Anna Karenina. I have wanted to see that movie, and I know Joe Wright directed that with Keira Knightley.
He did.
I think Jude Law's in that one, too.
There's a bunch of people in it, and yes, Jude Law is one of them. Aaron Taylor-Johnson. Matthew McFadden is also in it. He plays her brother.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Ooh, that's so weird. Well, anyway.
Right?
Anna Karenina, I've actually wanted to see since I saw the trailer. A buddy of mine just read the book like a year or two ago. He said it was a kind of a chore to get through because it's a fat one.
Russian literature.
Yeah, but I do want to see that one. So maybe that'll be just like an afternoon watch one of these days.
Nice. Matthew McFadden is also in the remake of Robin Hood with Russell Crowe in it. He actually plays the Sheriff of Nottingham in that version.
Oh, cool. I still haven't seen that one. That's the Ridley Scott one.
Right.
Yeah, got to see that one. I know it's not liked by a lot of people. But
he also is the main character in Death at a Funeral. He's the son.
Oh, my gosh. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, yeah, with Alan Tudyk.
Oh, so funny. Well, there's 2 of them.
That's right.
Well, actually, there's the British version, and then there's the black cinema version.
Exactly,
and
with Chris Rock.
They're both hilarious. Mm-hmm. And Peter Dinklage is in both of them.
He is.
So awesome. So awesome.
That's fantastic. And Matthew McFadden is most recognizable from the show Succession. He plays Tom.
Oh.
The husband.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen Succession. I hear it's great.
Oh, God. Speaking of unlikable characters, everybody in that show is so awful.
I've heard that, yeah. You can't like anybody, but you love them all at the same time.
Exactly. Donald Sutherland plays the father. He's been in so many great films. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
The Dirty Dozen, which I think you mentioned recently in passing.
I did.
Yeah. He's also in MASH, Animal House, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1974 version.
Nice.
Backdraft, JFK, the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's awesome in it. He's her trainer. It's really good.
Cool.
Yeah. Luke Perry is in that film too. It's a great B-movie horror. I love it so much.
I have not seen the OG movie.
God.
I've never even seen a Buffy episode with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Oh, I've seen that whole series. It's great.
Cool.
He also is a general in Outbreak. He's great. He's a total asshole in that movie. He's so good. He, of course, is in The Italian Job, the newer one.
Yes, that's right.
And he and Jenna Malone actually reunite because he's in the Hunger Games.
Oh, interesting.
They're both in the Hunger Games together.
And they're both in Cold Mountain together, though they never share a scene
together.
together.
Gosh, that's right. They are. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
And Joe Wright wanted to cast Donald Sutherland as Mr. Bennet after watching him in Cold Mountain.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, Donald Sutherland reminded Joe Wright of his father. And Joe said in an interview, I cast Donald because A, he's a god, which is true.
Yeah.
And B, you need someone of that strength to handle those 6 women.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Very cool.
But speaking of casting, Joe Wright was actually really reluctant to cast Simon Woods as Mr. Bingley because Simon Woods had previously been in a relationship with Rosamund Pike, and they play love interests in this movie. And
crazy how that happens.
Yeah, and he said he tried very hard not to cast Simon, but he was so perfect for the role of Mr. Bingley that he absolutely had to. So he called up Rosamund Pike and asked her if she would mind, right? Because we didn't want a similar Game of Thrones situation where Lena Headey and the guy who plays Bronn who hate each other and could never be in a scene together.
So nuts.
And Rosamund Pike was actually perfectly fine with it. She would absolutely not mind. They hadn't seen each other for over 2 years, but the next day they were dancing together and they said it was lovely.
Oh, cool.
So apparently they had ended their relationship amicably, which is nice.
That is very cool.
Yeah. And we have talked about Carey Mulligan a little bit. Loved her so much in this movie. It's so cool. It was her first. She's been in some great films, even though I'm not a huge fan of them. A lot of people do love them. The Great Gatsby. I didn't like that film at all. But
I don't remember anything of that movie.
she plays Daisy, the main character in the film. She's
Okay.
also in Drive with Ryan Gosling.
She's good in Drive. I think she has 8 pieces of dialogue.
Well, so does he, right?
So does it. Yeah, there's not a lot of dialogue between either of them, but yeah, she's good in that one.
She's also in Shame, Far from the Madding Crowd, Saltburn, Maestro, lame.
Yeah.
But I want to give a shout out because I love this film so much. She stars in Promising Young Woman.
Yeah, Promising Young Woman turned me into a Carey Mulligan fan.
Me too.
I did not like her because I think it goes back to like when you hate a character so much in a movie that you can't watch that actor anymore.
Yeah.
Not like how we don't like Jenna Malone, just like, this movie Inside Llewyn Davis with her and Oscar Isaac, the Coen Brothers movie. She's she's so awful in that movie to Llewyn Davis. And again, she made me hate her.
Yeah.
And then I saw Promising Young Woman, was like, all right. And I saw Shame, and Shame's fucked up. If you've ever seen Shame, that movie's twisted. But Promising Young Woman, I guess, is also pretty twisted as well.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was great. Saltburn, I did not like. Like I've said that before. First hour was great. It tanks after that. But Carey Mulligan was all right in it. I think she had like 8 minutes of screen time. But yeah, Promising Young Woman, thumbs up.
Great film. And the last cast member I want to talk about is Kelly Riley. She actually plays Mr. Bingley's sister. And she's such a bitch in this movie. Oh my god.
Yeah, she really is.
She's so judgy and pretentious and oh god, she's awful.
I loved her though.
She's so great. She's so good. So good. She
every
plays...
time she's just like the whole like the bowing and everything.
Mrs. Bennet.
Like you're just like just wipe that smug look off your face.
Kelly Riley is really recognizable from, funny enough, the movies of Sherlock Holmes because she plays Mary Jude Law's wife in those movies.
Sweet. I still have not seen the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes either.
She's also more recently in A Haunting in Venice. She plays the mother.
Oh, that is a good movie.
And she plays Beth Dutton in Yellowstone.
Haven't seen any of that, so I wouldn't know.
She's a bitch in that show too, but like,
is
but
she really?
You just love her. Yeah, like you don't even hate her, you just love her in that show. And of course, we also get a cameo by Judi Dench in this film.
Oh my gosh, that's right. When when the camera pans, I was like, Judi Dench, here we go. She was a pistol too. My gosh,
she was.
That late night visit was just. I was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
And Joe Wright was able to cast Judi Dench because he wrote her a letter saying, "I love it when you play a bitch."
Awesome.
And apparently she does too.
Has she played a lot of bitches? I guess I've only ever really seen her as M and like sweet older women.
Oh no, she's always a bit of a firecracker in her older age. She's been awesome. I mean, M. Oh my gosh, one of that insult in Goldeneye when M. Sometimes I worry you don't have the balls for this job. And she goes, "Oh, well, the good thing about being a woman is I don't always have to think with them."
Nice.
She's awesome. I love Judi Dench. And Emma Thompson, which funny enough, she's been in Jane Austen movies.
Yes.
She did an uncredited and unpaid rewrite of the script.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
She wrote. Yeah.
Wow.
She received a special thanks credit at the end, but she wrote 2 scenes of the movie, which both were really pivotal and really good. So first she wrote the scene where Charlotte Lucas tells Elizabeth that she's actually going to marry Mr. Collins.
Oh, yeah.
When they're out in the barn together and they have a little bit of an argument, which is a great scene.
Yeah, that is a good one.
And then the other scene is when Elizabeth's really upset because she received that letter about Lydia eloping. And she's crying to her aunt and uncle and Mr. Darcy.
Right.
And walking back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good scene too.
It is, and Emma Thompson wrote it.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. And going back to your movie, as I mentioned, there was a piece of trivia that connected them. Tamsin Merchant, the young actress who played Mr. Darcy's sister, she did her own piano playing during the movie.
Oh, really?
And she was fantastic.
Yeah, she really was.
And even though this story of Pride and Prejudice was written and published in 1813, Joe Wright actually set this movie back in 1797.
Oh.
Which was the year this first draft of Pride and Prejudice was written.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Which it's set 16 years earlier. That might be why the clothing is a little bit different than Emma. A little less colorful. But they're also poorer, so they can't afford those clean, crisp, dyed clothes, right?
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
And Rosamund Pike turned down the role of Rita Skeeter in the Harry Potter movies to be in this film for Joe Wright because she was his first choice. Yeah. Which...
Whoa.
Pride and Prejudice is very popular still to this day, you know, nearly 20 years later. But man, you turned down being part of the Harry Potter series, and this was in the 4th movie, so you knew they were billion-dollar movies.
Jeez.
That's an impressive decision.
That is very, I don't know. I wonder if she regrets it now.
I mean, Pride and Prejudice is still regarded as a great film.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you got any percentage or back points, then
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But Keira Knightley was not Joe Wright's first choice to play Elizabeth.
Oh, really?
He thought she was way too attractive. But he changed his mind when he met her. And she tells this story on the Graham Norton show. It's so funny. It's during an interview. And she is telling Graham about how Joe Wright didn't want to cast her. And then she goes to meet him and she says, he initially thought I was too pretty, but then he met me in person and said, oh no, you're fine.
That's great.
Yeah, but I'm really glad she was cast. She was actually perfect. She's gorgeous, of course, but that's not distracting in this film.
No, definitely not.
And she fits the role. It doesn't seem like wrong casting either. Like we were talking about, someone too attractive for the role of Mr. Darcy, right?
Right. Yeah. No, completely agree. I love Graham Norton. His show is so good.
The best talk show, and he's the best host because he doesn't interrupt his guests.
Yeah, and he was Moonwind in Soul.
Yeah, he was. And there are a lot of frequent close-up of Matthew McFadden's hand as Mr. Darcy in this film.
I noticed that.
Mm-hmm. It is a reference to the fact that the ultimate goal of the Bennett sisters is to get a wealthy man's hand in marriage.
Ah, interesting. Well, that's a cool way to do it.
Yeah, I really like that I read that piece of trivia because I've always wondered as well. And you said the actress who plays the youngest daughter, Mary, that you did like and enjoy her in this film. She's considered very plain in the family, and they talk about that a couple times, actually.
Yes.
And they don't expect her to have an advantageous marriage because of it, because Jane and Elizabeth are the pretty ones in the family. But
right.
In fact, Mary Bennett was played by Tallulah Riley. Well, in real life, Tallulah Riley was married to Elon Musk twice.
Oh, whoa, really?
Yeah, so she had pretty good prospects, apparently.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, they were married twice.
That's interesting.
It is. I never knew he was married to the same woman twice. It's pulled on Elizabeth Taylor, apparently.
Yeah.
And Keira Knightley was actually preparing for her role in Domino, a Tony Scott film.
Oh, yeah.
While she was filming Pride and Prejudice. And so she had already cut her hair. And so she had to wear a wig during the last few weeks of filming and wear long sleeves to hide her muscles.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, so some of the costumes were specifically chosen because of Keira Knightley preparing for the next film.
Did you ever see Domino? I saw it one time in theaters, and I remember I liked it.
Yeah, same. I saw it one time. I don't remember it. I remember Mickey Rourke's in it, right?
Yes, Mickey Rourke is in it, and oddly enough, they pretty much show you the whole movie in the trailer.
Yeah.
But the movie was still pretty badass and very Tony Scott.
Yeah, I remember it having the same frenetic edits like Man on Fire.
Very much so, yeah.
And Pride and Prejudice was as popular when it was released as it is now because it had a budget of $28 million.
Damn.
In the U.S., it grossed $38 million. And worldwide, on a $28 million budget, it made $122 million.
Jeez.
So it did great.
Popular story.
It was, and it was actually nominated for 4 Oscars.
Really?
Best Music by Dario Miranelli, who was also the composer for Atonement, and also the composer for Anna Karenina. And as we said, he won the Oscar for Atonement.
Yes, that's right.
Well deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Costume was also nominated.
Awesome.
Best Art Direction. And Keira Knightley was nominated for Best Actress.
Wow. Wow, that's very cool. I had no idea. I don't remember that, but that's awesome.
Yeah. And that is Pride and Prejudice, a movie I was able to introduce John to this week, and I'm glad you didn't hate it.
Yes, definitely. Me too. Very enjoyable watch.
Good. I'm so glad you had a good time. And you can rent it on any of the streaming services right now.
That's what I did. I rented it on Apple.
All right. Like I said, I'm really glad we decided to do this topic this week. Jane Austen movies are really fun to visit, and now we both are more excited to read her books as well, and I hope you all are too. And I really liked this pairing because it gives us the opportunity to decide which trope we like better, enemies to lovers or friends to lovers.
You know, both of them are very good, and both of them work out in one way or another for everybody that's involved. So I would say that I'm a 50-50 on both of those spectrums.
Okay, that's interesting. I have thought about it, especially now watching the new season 3 of Bridgerton with your wife and seeing the first couple of seasons on my own over the last couple years. I really like the enemies to lovers trope the best. I like the added tension and sparks that are thrown out because they're enemies first.
Okay, well, I can understand that. I have not watched a single minute of Bridgerton, but...
You're missing out.
I'm sure I am. A lot of my lady friends out in the world are big Bridgerton fans, and a lot of my female friends are very excited for the next half of this current Bridgerton season, including my wife.
Yes, we have plans to watch it because it's coming out tomorrow.
Oh, well, wonderful. I guess you and I won't record our next episode for another few days then. I do like the enemies to lovers trope. I like both of them, kind of 50-50 on it.
Well, and we know in this episode you actually preferred the friends to lovers trope.
Yes, I did, especially with Emma and Mr. Knightley. Absolutely.
Well, great. I'm so glad we had a Jane Austen dedicated episode. This was so much fun. I really love revisiting your film, and I love both of these stories as well, and I'm wondering if you would ever watch Emma with your grandma.
Yeah, I think my grandmother would have enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's PG. It's nothing like too crass or too out of control. It's very straightforward, good dialogue flick.
It's very chaste.
And V, would you watch Pride and Prejudice with your grandmother?
Absolutely. I've seen it with my sister and would watch it with my mother. Again, it's a very tame film as well, and also rated PG.
There you go.
Well, great. I think that about wraps up our Jane Austen episode. John, do you want to tell our fine audience what we're doing next week?
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to be doing 2 films that our fathers have picked for us to do for a Father's Day episode. My dad chose a film by Richard Curtis starring Domhnall Gleeson, Rachel McAdams, Bill Nighy, Lindsay Duncan, and Tom Hollander, and Margot Robbie in a very early role of hers. This will be About Time, everybody. And if you care to follow along, it is currently streaming on Peacock, or you can rent it on all of the other streamers. I will be watching my DVD copy. And V, what did your father pick for our Father's Day episode this next week?
My father, being the avid DVD collector that he is, put a whole pile of movies on the table for me to choose from. He actually had given me 7 options, which I deeply appreciated. They're all very good. I've seen all of them with him, actually.
Perfect.
2 of them we actually have on the list already.
Wonderful.
Which just means he has really great taste. And the other couple are classics, and for our inaugural Father's Day special episode, I had to go with a Western because that's what I think of when I think of watching movies with my father. He gave me 2 of them. One was Shane, which we actually ended up watching together recently, and I didn't like it as much as the first time I'd seen it with him, so I decided not to go with that one, unfortunately. So instead, the other Western that he chose is a classic. I'm so excited to introduce you to it. It is the original The Magnificent Seven.
Oh, sweet. I've never seen that one. I'm looking forward to that one now.
I'm so excited for you to see it.
I haven't even seen the remake, so I'm going in blind.
And you're going in order now, so which is even better.
Exactly, yes.
All right, looking forward to that episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. We're always looking to add new listeners to the show. And of course, you can follow us at Movies You Miss Pod on all the social media. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you know we love to end our podcast with film as a form of art. And in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think
Pride and Prejudice and Emma are Shakespearean adaptations.
Get your authors right.
Yeah, people.
All right, everyone, thanks again, and hope to have you rejoin us next week.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.